The leftover pizza was divided up, and the Democrats of North Fulton County sat and chatted about an issue that had been in the back of their minds for months: President Biden's future. There was no question that the people in the room, dedicated Democrats who all together in John's Creek to talk strategy and advance the party's aims, would vote for Biden in the general election. But the cold pizza-fueled debate was about the people outside the room, the friends and family and neighbors they would try to persuade again to vote for him and other Democrats in 2024. Debi Watson, a 66-year-old retired paralegal, said she thought of them when she heard on the radio about the 80-year-old president stumbling on the stairs of Air Force One, afraid that a tumble would hurt him and the electoral chances of the party he leads. I noticed in speeches when he gets off script, then he starts to make mistakes. I'm worried about his health, and I don't know how much I like Kamala Harris if something happens to him. Watson said the Democratic Party hesitantly supports Joe Biden, but they have no other choice. Many believe he is the best hope to prevent a second term for former President Donald Trump and to counter extremism. As for the Republicans, is Biden an easy opponent? Who has the best chance to defeat the incumbent president? Or will the 81-year-old leader continue to hold the future of America? Join us in exploring the answers in today's world affairs as we spotlight the strongest rivals for Biden. As President Joe Biden kicks off his re-election bid, he begins from a position of weakness. The president has been underwater in the polls for close to 2 years. His approval ratings dropped under 50% around the time of the chaotic Afghanistan pullout in August 2021 and never truly recovered. Only three post-war presidents, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and Donald Trump, were in a worse polling spot at this point in their re-election campaign, and two of those three lost. Yet, Biden won't be easy pickings from the GOP. Over the past 75 years, only two Democrats won a higher percentage of the popular vote than Biden: Barack Obama in 2008 and Lyndon Johnson in 1964. And Biden carries the formidable advantages of incumbency, along with a largely denied party behind him. As the 2024 campaign begins in earnest, the pandemic is effectively over, and the economy is showing resilience, and the GOP faces the prospect of a demolitions derby primary. Perhaps most importantly, Biden proved in 2020 that not only could he rebuild the so-called blue wall, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, he could snag increasingly purple Arizona and Georgia. So which Republican contender is best positioned to take on Biden and win back those swing states? U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday, April the 25th, rallied union workers at a gathering in Washington, hours after announcing he will run for re-election. The event took place as House Republicans predicted a success for an uncertain debt ceiling vote. Biden said Congress must raise the debt ceiling with their conditions, as it did 3 times under Republican President Donald Trump, to avoid default. A default would be totally irresponsible, Biden said during his first public speech since releasing the video officially launching his 2024 candidacy. We are not a debt-fit nation. The crowd listening to Biden stood up and chanted slogans such as "Let's go, Joe," and 4 more years as Biden talked about the economy and blast MAGA extremists. MAGA is the acronym for the Make America Great Again slogan of Trump, who is the only front-runner in the Republican primary race. If he wins, he will face off against Biden again in November 2024 election. White House spokesperson Karen Jean-Pierre said on Tuesday, April the 25th, that if re-elected, President Joe Biden will serve for 8 years. Jean-Pierre tweeted this after declining to respond if the president intended to serve the full term if his 2024 run for the White House is successful. Biden 18 must overcome Americans' concerns about his age in order to win re-election, with 44% of Democrats saying he's too old to run. A Reuters Ipsos poll on April 24th found.
Thư ký báo chí Nhà Trắng Karine Jean-Pierre ngày 25 tháng 4 cho biết nếu tái đắc cử, Tổng thống Joe Biden chắc chắn sẽ tại vị trong 8 năm. Bà Jean-Pierre đăng thông điệp đó trên Twitter sau khi vừa từ chối trả lời câu hỏi liệu Tổng thống Biden có dự định phục vụ xuyên suốt cả nhiệm kỳ nếu thắng cử vào năm sau hay không. Ông Biden sẽ 86 tuổi khi kết thúc nhiệm kỳ thứ hai. Các bác sĩ khẳng định ông Biden, người không uống rượu và tập thể dục 5 ngày mỗi tuần, khỏe mạnh để hoàn thành nhiệm vụ của Tổng thống. Bài kiểm tra sức khỏe gần nhất tiến hành vào tháng 2 năm nay. Nhà Trắng cho biết hồ sơ sức khỏe của Tổng thống cho thấy ông đủ minh mẫn và nhạy bén để thực hiện công việc. Nhưng theo một khảo sát của Reuters và iPost công bố ngày 24 tháng 4, khoảng 44% Đảng Dân Chủ được hỏi ý kiến đã nói rằng Tổng thống Biden nên nghỉ hưu thay vì tiếp tục chạy đua vào Nhà Trắng.
So, which Republican contender is best positioned to take on Biden and win back those swing states? According to Politico, here is a clear-eyed look at their strengths and weaknesses. Twice impeached, once indicted, the only president since the advent of polling whose approval rating never cracked 50%. Trump doesn't exactly cut the profile of a model challenger. Even in his two presidential runs, his high watermark and the popular vote was just under 47%. But in 2016, he showed there was a path to an electoral college win nonetheless. In a rematch with Biden, Trump would likely be better politically positioned than many of his GOP rivals on issues like entitlement reform and abortion, where he tackled a bit more to the center. Still, there is a matter of 5 states that Biden flips in 2020: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. Trump would need to win all of them back to recapture the White House, but he would likely need at least 3 of those states, and none of them is a slam dunk. That's not because of Biden's strengths, but Trump's flaws. There are clear signs of more professionalized Trump's campaign operation than in the past, but Trump is still Trump. For example, his Easter message on the holiest day on the Christian calendar goes, "Happy Easter to all, including those that dream endlessly of destroying our country because they are incapable of dreaming about anything else. Those that are so incompetent that they don't realize that having a border and powerful goal is a good thing. And having voter ID, all paper ballots, and same-day voting will quickly end massive voter fraud. And to all those weak and pathetic rhinos, radical left Democrats, socialists, Marxists, communists who are killing our nation, remember, we will be back." On April the 25th, right after Biden announced his candidacy, former President Trump quickly reacted. He posted an article on Truth Social criticizing Biden's administration for its handling of immigration, inflation, and the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Trump asserted, "Never before have there been 2 consecutive presidential terms with such stark contrast in American history. Our term was outstanding, while theirs has been a failure." Donald Trump lost out at President Joe Biden during a rally in Fort Miller, Florida, April the 21st, calling him Gaga. When you watch the rhetoric of this president of ours, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. You know, sometimes you have to talk tough and sometimes you have to talk so often. He's got to make it up. He talks tough when you're supposed to talk soft, and you talk soft when you're supposed to talk tough. And he's all gaga. Then he walks off the stage, but he's supposed to walk that way. "Where am I?" Trump told his supporters. Trump has a huge lead over DeSantis among Republican and Independent voters nationally of 58% to 21% in an early April Reuters Ipsos poll. Other polls of Republicans alone show Trump has surged to lead DeSantis in recent weeks. Trump also claimed his innocence and calls his indictment a witch hunt. He also criticized his opponents. As the endless witch hunts and persecutions reveal, our enemies are desperate to stop us because they know we are the only ones who can stop them. We're going to stop them and they're not happy about it, Trump said.
Ông Trump nói, các cuộc săn phù thủy và những nỗ lực truy tố bất tận đã thể hiện rằng đối thủ đang tuyệt vọng cản đường chúng ta. Vì họ biết chỉ có chúng ta mới có thể ngăn cản ngược lại họ.
This week state that when decide the 2024 election are among those that have been the most destabilized by Trump's polarizing politics, either because of his conflicts with the state parties or the forces unleashed by his baseless claims of election fraud.
Hãy xét đến Georgia, cuộc bầu
Take Georgia. The 2022 Republican primary there represented a massive repudiation of the former president when Trump's hand-picked nominee, Herschel Walker, was defeated. In Arizona, ground zero for election denialism, the Trump-endorsed statewide candidates crashed and burned in November. Biden was no offset to Democrats in 2022, but Trump was equally damaging. While 38% of Arizona voters say that they cast their vote to oppose Biden, according to exit polls, 35% said that they were to oppose Trump. The blue wall that Trump cracked in 2016 is equally daunting. Democrats are now in ascendance in Michigan and Pennsylvania, which have moved in tandem in presidential elections for close to 40 years. In no small part due to a backlash against Trump in the most populous suburbs. Short of a massive rural turnout in those states or a black swan event, Biden has a decided edge against Trump in both places. In Wisconsin, the closest of three states in 2020, a mere 20,000 votes separate Biden and Trump, but the trend lines for the GOP aren't promising there either. In both 2016 and 2020, Trump ran behind traditional Republicans' margins in the conservative suburbs of Milwaukee that are essential to GOP chances. Worse, the Trump era has seen the rise of liberal Dan Kelty as an electoral powerhouse, and a Trump-led GOP ticket is guaranteed to generate another monster turnout there.
đấu với ông Biden, điều đó sẽ dẫn tới một lượng lớn cử tri đi bầu ở đen. Một gương mặt khác có tiềm năng.
In the view of many Republican officials, DeSantis is Trump without the baggage and drama. If he runs, they envision a conservative big state governor, fresh off a landslide re-election, prosecuting a vigorous case against an enfeebled Biden, an incumbent who's nearly twice his age.
Cũng thể hiện hình ảnh trẻ trung, nhiệt huyết, tương phản với Tổng thống Biden, người có số tuổi gần gấp đôi vị thống đốc. Ông DeSantis được kỳ vọng có
It's true that DeSantis might staunch the bleeding in traditionally Republican suburbs, particularly across the Sun Belt, while maintaining the other elements of the mega coalition. Just as important, his robust performance among all Latino groups in Florida in his 2022 re-election caught both parties' attention. He outpaced even Trump's 2020 Latino gains. But the governor's recent stumbles have raised real questions about how he would fare on the national stage under the relentless pressure of a presidential election, where there is no place for the press-averse DeSantis to hide from media. And the disciplined approach and short political instincts that enabled his rapid rise on the national scene haven't been sufficient to shield him from Trump's assault. If he does emerge from a smashed mouth primary against Trump, DeSantis will enter the general election against Biden with deep scores to show for it. In presidential elections, governors typically face questions about their lack of foreign policy experience, and DeSantis is no exception. DeSantis' description of Russia's war in Ukraine as a territorial dispute, which he later walked back amid bipartisan criticism, which only bolstered the case for Biden as an experienced hand. Yet that stance may not be nearly so politically problematic as the bill that he signed recently banning abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy. DeSantis, who is expected to announce his candidacy in May after the legislative session, may have advanced his prospects in a GOP primary, but polling and recent election results in the swing states that would decide the presidency suggest his position could be a milestone. If DeSantis is the GOP nominee, the ban makes it more likely than ever that abortion rights won't be a central issue in 2024. drowning out the other issues where Biden would be more vulnerable.
mà Tổng thống Biden dễ tổn thương và dễ thất bại hơn.
The next promising face from the Republican Party, poised to surprise when confronting Biden, is former Vice President Mike Pence. Biden proved that former vice presidents can sit on the sidelines for 4 years and still return to win the presidency. But Pence is no ordinary vice president.
Nhiều người cho rằng sếp của ông Pence từng không ngăn chặn đám đông xông vào điện Capitol.
For one thing, his board expressed support for hanging him amid the January 6th riot. That strained relationship with Trump has made Pence, who said Sunday he would announce his 2024 presidential decision well before late June, a long shot to win the nomination. The best case for Pence in a general election is that he is a Reagan conservative whose loyal service to Trump could bridge the gap between traditional Republicans and the MAGA wing of the party. As a former Midwestern governor, he is positioned to compete in the industrial swing state that flipped to Biden in 2020. Georgia's 16 electoral vote would also seem to be enriched for Pence, given the architecture of Republican Governor Pricamp's successful 2022 re-election campaign. The flip side is that some corners of the MAGA movement might never forgive Pence's refusal to bend to Trump's pressure to block certification of the 2020 Electoral College vote. And Pence's vote winning appears on his own remains uncertain. Despite his estrangement from Trump and a suburban dad image, he can easily step aside his affiliation with Trump's slash and burn politics.
Của sếp cũ Donald Trump. Cách làm của ông Trump là xô ngã và hạ đò ván mọi đối thủ khi có.
Next, let's analyze the chances of former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. As a daughter of a family that's immigrated from India, Haley would make history as she represents the Republican Party in the 2024 presidential race. This ticket has never before belonged to a woman of color. That stated, along with her age, she's roughly 30 years younger than Biden, would make for a stacked contrast on the campaign trail. Haley, who announced her bid in February, also offers this prospect of shrinking the gender gap in the general election in 2020. Exit polls from her 2014 re-election also showed Haley runs strong in the suburbs and with independents, two additional groups Trump lost in 2020. But establishing her independence from Trump won't be easy. She's frequently been critical of the former president, but she also went to work for Trump as his ambassador to the UN and has spent the last few years praising his agenda, positions that could limit her appeal with voters looking for a clean break from Trump. South Carolina Governor Tim Scott is also a noteworthy candidate from the Republican Party. Scott's excellent political skills have been demonstrated since he was appointed as a senator in 2013 by then Governor Nikki Haley. Within a year, he had outperformed both Haley and senior Senator Lindsey Graham on the ballot. In 2016, he ran ahead of Donald Trump in South Carolina by more than 86,000 votes. In his three Senate campaigns, however, Scott has never faced serious Democratic opposition or intense media scrutiny. It showed on his second day of campaigning after announcing a presidential exploratory committee, when he stumbled badly on the question of whether he would back federal abortion restrictions. And any expectation that Scott, who would be the GOP's first black presidential nominee, could carve out some of Biden's considerable support among black voters must be tempered by Scott's actual performance. While the senator has improved his percentages over the past decade, he regularly loses the majority of the state's 9 majority black counties. Several candidates making the early state rounds, among them Vivek Ramaswamy and Perry Johnson, don't have an electoral record to assess. Besides, former two-term Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson and current New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu have met with success at the ballot box, not to mention some of the highest approval rating in the nation. As popular traditional conservatives who have been loudly Trump critics within the party, they would likely be well positioned to compete across the map in a general election. but the GOP base doesn't show much appetite for nominating a Trump critic. The prospect of two octogenarian rivals facing off still seems quite possible, according to analysis by ABC News, CNN, and Politico. Many believe that 2024 U.S. presidential election won't be extremely exhausting and boring, while others argue that next year's race will be full of surprises and hard to predict. After all, both Biden and Trump have officially entered the arena, while DeSantis is also making careful calculations. It's a long road that tests the strength of horse. The upcoming race will have many more stories to be told.